welcome to Go For Your Life. Thank you so much for tuning in and giving me your listening ears. Woohoo! This is a podcast for everyone, about everything, and it's to encourage, inspire, uplift you to go for your life. And it is presented and hosted by myself, Caro, and my sweet dog, Sparky. Give it up for him. I hope you're ready. Enjoy. Welcome back, Austin, on this Go For Your Life podcast. And we haven't been together since January 21 online, so that's really cool. And it's so amazing to have you back. So thank you so much for being back.
Well, thank you for asking me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes. And I thought, let's just dive in straight away because Austin, I will also have a link to your other episode 45 in the show notes, so people can kind of have a listen to the other episodes. You are owner of Urban Sadhu, a beautiful studio in New Jersey.
Yes.
And so we were talking a little bit, and we'll go a little bit, back and forth about, your studio and everything. But we were talking a little bit about the war and what's happening at the moment, and also a little bit our responsibility as yoga teachers to bring that up, to talk about it, to start a conversation. So I thought, in this time that we're living in now, it'd be really important for us to bring that up because I feel you once said also, I remember that last time we spoke, you said something about that a student once told you like, hey, I'm here to relax. I'm not here for politics.
Right. And like, and yoga is about politics.
Yeah. And I just felt a little bit like, I think it's important that we bring in that we have a responsibility. Yoga is politics. Yoga is having a conversation about what's happening in the world. So let's dive in there, Austin.
Yeah. I think, and when you said about the war, it's so funny, like, which war are we talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
And are we talking about war in general? And since we've definitely had, like, over the past 2 or 3 years, several wars flare up around the world, I found that, like, we're in a climate where either people are very vocal about it and it becomes a very black and white issue, or you're totally avoiding the conversation altogether. You're kind of skirting around it and trying not to get caught up in social media's crossfire of whose side are you on? And so I started thinking about, like, well, what does Yoga Shastras have to say about war? And not from just the point of view of, like, what my teachers taught me or what a generation from the 1960s that I learned yoga from had to say about it, but really, what does the text have to say about it? And it actually has a lot to say about it. And it actually might not, what the text, when I started the journey with just starting with the Vedas, does the Vedas even mention war? Well, they do mention war. That's, it talks about the fact that a nation or a group of people have a right to defend themselves against an invader. And it gives a very clear rule of about 5 or 6 different things of the rules of engagement of war. Starting not to harm children and not to harm women or elderly people. That those vulnerable people that can't defend themselves should not be harmed in a defensive battle. And it goes on with some, other things of how that kind of invasion, kind of defensive thing should happen. But so it sets a tone, accepting the fact that there's war in the world. And then everybody kind of lands on, the Bhagavad Gita because it's set in the middle of a war.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that becomes really the text that everybody goes to. But if we look at, like, almost all of the different Puranic stories, Durga fights a war against the Asura. Kali fights a war against the Asura. So we see even in the early ones, there's the battles between the Asuras and the Devas for the nectar elixir of life. And so you're constantly seeing that there's this idea of conflict happening, and the conflict is sometimes on a spiritual level, but like in Puranic, this is obviously metaphor. But then you have the Vedas that is giving you an understanding of the rule of a real war that's going to happen. Look at the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita. I think the biggest mistake that yoga teachers make is that they've been taught by that generation from the 1960s about the Bhagavad Gita, but they've never really had to read the Mahabharata. They've never had to go into the full story and the complex situation of how we get on the battlefield with Krishna and Arjuna. And when you realize that the Mahabharata, it's a retelling of the events that happen through at the time of Arjuna's grandson, because he's forgotten the history of the battle. And there's a situation happening between the Nags. Some people may say it's tribal, other people say it's snakes, but Nag means we don't know if it's their totem or if they're snakes. But there's this revenge, like getting even with something, and neither one of them really remember why they're out to get the other one. And he has to come in and say, here, I'm going to tell you the story of your grandparents. And that starts the telling of this conflict. It's very complex, very entangled, with family members, and doesn't end in a way that anybody thinks it might end at the very end. It's not a clear cut at the end. It's not a clear cut, the good guys, the bad guys. Story.
It's also like, I think what you're saying also, it's the complexity of it too, right? That you really start to understand when you see the depth of this story, like
Yes, that is the complexity of understanding that, and understanding that when you read the bigger text, that both the good guys, I'm putting that in quotation, and the bad guys, in quotation marks, have good and bad qualities themselves. It's not either or. They both have qualities that can be slightly noble and are also kind of repugnant sometimes. And so they're human.
And did you also feel, because just sorry to interrupt you, like, because you now bring out this exploration, right? The 1st of December, we're gonna read your exploration for your monthly, what you do at your yoga studio. You have an exploration every month. Did you feel like now was really an important time to do this?
I did. I'm not sure what's going on in Europe, but I do know what's going on in America. And I think since the war in Israel has started, there's been a very kind of like, whose side are you on kind of approach to this very horrific problem that's been happening for generations. And it's like the Mahabharata. It goes back to earlier action that even the people who are involved are not were not a part of those original decisions and actions that were being made by outsiders. So the complexity of it is so complicated that and for somebody like myself, I've never been to the Middle East. So I have a very a humble approach to this problem, saying, I don't know, I've never even been there. I really don't understand the complexities of this conflict.
Because I also love what you said about, like, the choosing sides automatically becomes otherness, right? And that's something that we need to address also in yoga, I guess, that, that's a really important thing.
I mean, I'm a big believer that all suffering comes from otherness.
And, same.
And
separation.
Buddha said it was attachment. But if there's otherness, then I'm attached to my identity, who I think I am, and they think they are. So Buddha is right also that it's attachment, but the otherness is a form of attachment that keeps appearing, that has to be addressed. That the other, as long as they're the other, there is a lack of empathy, there is a lack of compassion, there is always a mistrust with the other, the outside, the one that is different, is, you're looking for the things that make them different from you instead of the things that make them similar to you. Yoga alleviates that. Yoga can ask you to remove the differences. It accepts.
And everybody is welcome at yoga, right? It doesn't matter who you are, that mat's there.
Yoga accepts that, you and I are having a unique experience in the body that we've been given, but ask us to come together and find the thing that makes us similar, which is so subtle and so deep inside of us that we have to make that internal journey to experience it. And then once we experience it, we can witness the oneness of being. We can witness that idea that all sentient beings suffer. They have hunger, they have fear, and that we witness that we all have hunger, fear, and we all suffer, then we can help to alleviate that suffering through our compassion and our unconditional love, and the fact that we can see each other, that we see them, they see us.
Yeah, exactly. And are you at the moment bringing it up in class, Austin? Is it something that you're talking about at the moment, and how are people reacting to that?
Well, we have started already kind of talking about it. We're still kind of, as we're recording this, we're at the end of November. So this in November, we're actually doing exploration on a Native American story about how a turkey saves the world. And
oh, wow. Okay.
Idea that the turkey is we're seeing, because of Thanksgiving and the feasting that happens in America, turkey being the center of that feast, as a bird to be eaten instead of celebrated. We're talking about the otherness of speciesism right now, but I think the idea of the subject of war will lead easily from the idea of speciesism into the idea of otherness in our own species, humans.
Because I think that's a really nice bridge.
We're easing people into it. And sometimes, it's interesting because sometimes it's easier for certain people to approach the subject of seeing otherness with other human beings. They have a hard time seeing it with animals. People, it's easier to approach the subject through like saying that other species are no different from us, and then they can see that, and then you have to lead them to the fact that other humans are the same as them also, that they have a time with humans.
Totally. I definitely sometimes I'm more of an animal person. But it's good. I think it's a beautiful way of like building that bridge. And the reason why I'm asking also is I think that a lot of, as you were saying, I think a lot of yoga teachers or in general, people in general also don't want to get into the subject, like they're too afraid, or they feel like, oh, people might not want to hear this when they come to yoga. But I feel it's so important. And our job as yoga teachers to bring politics into, like my teacher always says, Stuart, he always says, everything is politics.
Everything is politics. And I think that, and I think the thing is that if you as a yoga teacher, if you really do your homework a little bit, you'll find, and some of the things that the essay was already getting a little long. I like to keep my essays to about a page and a quarter, but this one was moving into like a page and a half. And I was like, okay, so I have to kind of stop kind of editing out some of these things I'd like to talk about. As you I think it's super important that you know, I'm gonna plug my friend Devdutt Panayak's book Jaya. Like, if you don't know Mahabharata, get a copy of Devdutt's book Jaya and read it. It's a really great way of kind of doing the Reader's Digest version of that story and how that story plays out. But one of the things that's important when you look at Jaya or the Mahabharata, and Devdutt talks a little bit about this in his book, that Krishna's brother Balarama, some people say that Balarama is a quarter percentage of Vishnu. Other people say he's like Shiva, that he's more of a Shivite character. But we rarely talk about Balarama. But Balarama, when the war breaks out between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, Krishna has been asked to be on the side of the Kauravas as an advisor. I'm sorry, the Pandavas as an advisor, and he's given the Kauravas his army. His brother comes to him and he says, "Listen, I don't think you should do this." He said, "You know, we don't have a dog in this fight. This is not a fight. We have nothing to gain from it. We're not going to get land from this. We're not going to get power. We're not going to get another throne. We already have a throne. They're our cousins. Both of these people are our cousins, but maybe we shouldn't even be picking sides between our cousins." And Krishna listens to him. He doesn't even get into a discourse with him. He listens to him and he says, "Well, brother, I wish you would like come and stand beside me." And Balarama says, "I'm going to go on a spiritual pilgrimage. I am not going to be around." So he becomes a conscious objector.
Yeah.
He's the conscious objector that's never talked about in this war. And so this idea that, you know, like a lot of my teachers that were kind of left over from that hippie era of the 1960s, they would say, like, when you say, "Well, how does Krishna feel about war?" They would always say things like, "Well, Krishna doesn't have an opinion about it." He does have an opinion about it. He's made a decision. This is not true. He has made a decision before we get on that battlefield that he's going to fight the battle. He's given one group his army, the other group his advice. So he has made a decision. He's not namby-pamby about this. And his brother has made a decision. His brother has said, "I don't want any part of it." And his brother leaves town. As a conscious objector. And so Balaram, who's an interesting character, goes on this, you know, religious pilgrimage. And when the war is over, he comes back. And interestingly enough, when he comes back, nobody is angry at him or shuns him for his decision. They are respectful of his decision of being a conscious objector. Nobody shames him or says, "Oh, look who's back in town now," you know, which is what we're seeing happening in social media. There's a kind of shaming or calling out of people, demanding that they kind of have a response. And if you don't have a response, then that's saying something. Or if you do have a response, that's saying something. So either way, you're not going to win.
Either way, exactly. It's not going to be right.
But Balaram is a very interesting character to look at from the point of view of when you're not one of the two people in the conflict, but you're on the outside looking in. And so he and Krishna are those outside looking in. Krishna makes a decision to get into it. Balarama makes the decision to stay out of it. Also, and this is the Vishnu Shiva balance, right? The renunciate walking away and going on a spiritual pilgrimage while Vishnu, the activator, staying involved in it. And that's a very
amazing way.
And that's a very, like, for a yoga teacher, this is a part of the story that really asks the students to sit and contemplate their
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
how they're going to respond mindfully.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because I think that that's also something that I'm really feeling. I know, I wonder how you feel about this, but I feel as a yoga teacher, we're kind of in the business of peacemaking, right? Like
Yes,
we're peacemakers. Like, so for me, a lot of times I feel it's also my responsibility to bring it up, because I feel like, yeah, if we talk about peace, we also have to talk about war. And war is specifically, and exactly what you said, which war, because, but like, of course, right now in Holland, the war in Israel, on the Gaza is very much alive, and like
yes,
exactly as you're explaining what it's like in the States, we have like two sides, and people are very caught up in their sides, and it's I think it's really difficult, you know. I think it's very difficult to, but I think we still need to bring up war as such, you know, like as a thing, like, you know, like people are dying, there is a genocide going on, and this is
yes,
wrong, you know.
yes.
So
And this
that's
is,
sort of, you know.
and I think this is a good point also, just talking about how the spiritual teachings have been dealt with in yoga and the spiritual bypassing of it. And I talk about
Yeah.
this in the essay specifically. And I say something that probably is going to make a couple of people angry, that my teachers, and like I said, a lot of my teachers were kind of boomers left over from the heydays of the Hey Man 60s hippie era. And they really promoted the idea that the war in the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita was a war within the mind. It wasn't a physical war. You said something that just touched on it, that this is a real war with people dying, people suffering. And so when you turn that completely into a metaphor, and yes, there is the idea that this is that the chitta vrittis of Arjuna's mind is keeping him from doing action. So there is mental things going on there. But if we just turn this into like a whole, like the war is in the mind, it denies the fact that there's real suffering, that there's real death, that there's real destruction, and that people are beings are being harmed. And when you read the whole Mahabharata, it's not just human beings that are being harmed, but there's many animals that are also harmed within the war itself. Elephants and horses that are in the battle. Birds are being harmed even. And we start to really, when we look at it from the fact that, like, let's say that there is a metaphor there, but this is a real war, then we can really look at the depths of suffering that war brings about. He was the first to start to promote the idea that the war was completely a metaphor. And I understand why he did that, because at the time he was dealing with the same kind of situation where a lot of the freedom fighters that he was fighting with had different opinions of how they should deal with the British. And he was promoting ahimsa and nonviolence and nonviolent activism. And that was taken, and then Prabhupada really brought that interpretation to America and kind of installed it within the Hare Krishna movement, which is who is the biggest group of people that I've learned from. I say that both of those gentlemen, while they were right about their peaceful demonstration and nonviolent activism, were wrong to spiritually bypass and turn the text into just a giant metaphor and something happening in the mind, because it denies the suffering of those beings that are going to die.
No, I think that's a really, really good point you're making, Austin. Because, and I think in general, there's a lot of spiritual bypassing going on when we talk about this subject, and generally, any subject. I think really in the yoga world, you just got to be so careful with that.
Yeah, and one of the things, and another thing that I didn't have space to put into this article is, after the war's over, and the war has now been promoted for Krishna by the time we get in the Gita, that it's a war of dharma. It's a dharmic war. that Arjuna is performing his dharmic duty, his righteous duty to smite down the unrighteous. And, if you don't read the whole book, you end up kind of walking away with a very Judeo-Christian, Abrahamic attachment to the book, that it's somehow about quote unquote righteousness, because we can't even translate the word dharma in English. We have no word that comes close. So you don't know that after that battle is over, the next thing that happens is Gandhara, the mother of the Kauravas, the quote unquote bad guys, wanders out onto the battlefield and sees all of her 100 sons dead.
Wow.
And she's devastated. She's uncontrollable. And what she does is she turns to Krishna and she says, you could have left me one child. You took every one of my children. She said, I curse you, I curse your family, I curse your city. You will die at the hands of the commoner. All your children will die. And your country, your kingdom will disappear and off the face of the earth. Her curse sticks. And what we learn from that part of the story is, even when something is dharmic, there could be one being that it's adharmic for them. And if it's adharmic for that one being, the mother of all of the quote unquote bad guys, then that cycle of otherness has not been solved through a war. Krishna is now the other. And he has to now suffer the karmic consequences of being in the war. And in a lot of ways, he completely accepts it.
It's kind of amazing how that story you can completely kind of relate to what's happening right now. It's like such an old story. It's so what's happening. I mean, people are being cursed, people are being killed, and it's really a reality thing now.
And everyone involved in this has a mother. That is worried about her child. No matter which side of the war they're on. That wants their child to come home. And no matter what side that child is on, that mother is going to grieve.
Exactly.
And be heartbroken. And all of the explaining, well, your child was on the wrong side of history, your child was on the wrong side of justice, your child was on the wrong side of this or that, it's not going to matter to that mother.
No, I think it's really important. I mean, I have a similar situation here in yoga in Amsterdam. Like, I had a student coming to the class, and she's Israeli, and her brother is at the Gaza at the moment, like fighting when he doesn't even really want to be there. And of course, she's Israeli, so she will take, her stand very clear where she's standing in a way, even though, of course, she just hates the war as a whole. And it's just, that was I remember that the day I met her, it was so, again, very complex, because it's for her it's also so double, because there's her brother there, and she just came from Israel, and her family's there, but of course she hates what's going on and does not agree with what her country is doing. So that's also so. And then I think it's good, to bring it up in a yoga class, that that we should at least just have a moment to reflect on it.
And as an American, I feel like that, I actually don't have a situation like that. Like, I don't have a student whose brother is actually fighting on either one of those sides. So, you're forming opinions kind of 6 degrees separated.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and it's like, and it's, you know, and that's something I think that you should always kind of step back and take note of when we talk about like that idea of otherness, the fact that me personally, I'm so distanced from it, I have to even recognize the way that my mind will create otherness even further
Good point,
from
Austin.
its
That's a good point.
distance of the engagement of the situation.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing everything that I know through the lens of, you know, the news media, through through social media, through opinions of people I talk to, you know,
Yeah.
and the lens, that's a very thick lens.
Yeah. No, definitely. Because do you like if you're just outside of your yoga studio at the moment, like New Jersey in general, like is it like alive there? Or are people talking about it? Are people concerned about it? Like how is New Jersey dealing with this, like as a community there?
Well, Jersey, you know, New Jersey is very diverse. It's very cosmopolitan, right? Jersey City is actually the most there's more the most diverse city in America. But there was deemed that for about the past 5 or 6 years on the statistics.
Yeah.
So there's a huge Arab community here in Jersey City. There is a Jewish community here in Jersey City. There is a huge Latino community here in Jersey City. There's a huge African American community in town. There's, you know, Caribbean community here, Asian community, Indian community, Chinese community. So it's very diverse. And it's interesting because I think sometimes with that much diversity, what actually happens is everybody is very quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's very like, you know, there's like people will ask you in private, you know, what you think or what you feel, but there's not a kind of outpouring, because when I have a yoga class, sometimes I'm the only white guy in the room, like serious.
Yeah.
You know, so you have people being very respectful and understanding, and because a lot of people are either first generation or second generation immigrants, they're even more sensitive
Yeah, absolutely.
to the
Yeah.
situation than if I was like in a city like LA, or, you know, I mean, or you know, Washington State or somewhere where it was
Yeah.
less diverse. I think diversity, I have found is a beautiful thing because it actually makes people more respectful of each other.
Yeah. Wow. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Aware of each other.
Yeah.
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 So
And
there
another
has,
thing to quickly ask you, how are things now since 21 with the studio? Like, how are things going? Like, how is Urban
oh,
Sadhu going? Are you?
we're doing fine. We're hanging in there. It's
Yeah.
very exciting.
Yeah.
We're going to host a teacher training with Omega Institute in 2020.
Ah,
Yeah.
our space.
So
Oh,
if people are looking for a 300-hour teacher training, that's a residential teacher training, we'll be doing that from
amazing.
July the 28th through August the 25th of 2024. And
Amazing.
so if you want to, you can come from anywhere in the world, come over here for a
Great.
month, add skills
Yeah.
and do the yoga. And we'll talk about these kind of things in our yoga teacher training. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
this, we deal with some hardcore, you know, stuff and issues, wanting our teachers to walk out of there being able to feel comfortable to have to, you know, when they have to talk about these kind of issues,
Yeah.
instead of not letting those issues come up during that teacher training. The other exciting thing about that teacher training is Devdutt Panaik is coming in from Mumbai, and
Wow.
he will be at the teacher training for a couple of days with our students, just talking to them and sharing with them his knowledge and his wisdom. And then he will
Yeah.
be doing a workshop that'll be open to the public, how mythology can end conflict and heal trauma, I think
Oh,
is the
wow.
it. So it will be that's a 3-day event for the public. Our students will be able to go to that too, where he's going to talk about that if we could understand each other's mythology, we
Huh.
could end conflict.
Wow. That's
That,
amazing.
and that's going to be, I think, an amazing time. And if you're not familiar with my friend Devdutt Panayak, look him up. He's a wonderful writer. He's a very wise guy, and we're really lucky to have him as part of this teacher training.
Amazing. It's also amazing that you go back to Omega, where we did our own training, Austin. Oh, it's also where we kind of met, a few
I
years
know.
ago and really connected.
I think it's been since 2016 since they've actually produced a 300-hour teacher training at Omega. They've done
Wow.
some weekend little
Okay.
trainings, like yin yoga or something like that. But since the pandemic, they have not
Yeah,
really.
of course.
So we're kind of also inaugurating them, kind of coming back, kind of doing a long
Awesome.
event.
Great. No, I'll definitely put it in the show notes because that's just
I'll send you a link
freaking
to.
amazing. Yeah,
So
that'd be really, really great. Because I think it's something that we spoke about in the other episodes. So people, please listen to the older episode where we speak a lot about how you were a Jivamukti studio first, and then you went to Urban Sadhu because you actually felt that you could address certain issues more as Urban Sadhu, as yourself, as your own studio. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit because I think that's really important stuff. Like how.
I think that one of the things that I think that's one of the things that happen, and I noticed constantly when I was a Jivamukti teacher, is I don't think that the method dealt very well with the suffering of people. But I don't want to discredit my own what they did for my journey. I was focused very much on people in the beginning, and switching, and when I started practicing my yoga practice with them, switching to like focusing on how my actions affect animals made me more aware of how my actions affect people.
Yeah, good point.
Deepened my understanding of the subtleties of my actions on a level I was unaware of. But sometimes I think that the messaging got a little muddled when you had situations like this come up, and there wasn't a understanding of how to address certain political, social issues that face humans. I think that we've been able to address some of those issues, especially issues that America itself is dealing with. It's racism, it's karma past, it's misogyny, it's kind of playing double standards with spirituality and religion within the country right now. We've been able to address some of those things on the platform that Jivamukti, I don't think, would be willing to. And I think that that's just something that they'll just have to find their voice in, because the world's changed.
Exactly.
It's changed so much, and it's not the same world as even when I started practicing yoga with them in 2008. It's a different world.
No, it's changed, definitely, and it keeps changing. Stuff keeps happening,
and yoga has to remain relevant. And if it doesn't remain relevant, then it becomes a museum piece. And it becomes a museum piece, it's obsolete.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's
it's really good.
And when you're trying to be also a global company, there's a lot more toes you can step on. So you're going to find yourself
Yeah.
kind of not saying what you mean and mean what you say.
Yeah, exactly.
So, because you don't
But
want
it's
to.
good. It's good. You found a freer form for yourself, also. Then, right, Austin? Like you found that freedom. You create this beautiful own method of urban sadhu. It's amazing to see how successful you are with that. Because I absolutely love what you put out there, and I'm just so grateful to see that it's successful and people are responding to it well. And because I think we need this. We need this in someone actually dares to there and speak about things that
Right. Yes. And I think the other thing is that kind of when you deal with I think one of the things is that when you kind of move back from that idea of this global company, that you also have to realize that different communities need different things.
So that's a good point.
And you
Communities
have
need different
to
things. Yeah.
allow some wiggle room within your methodology to
Yeah.
allow
Different
those
communities.
individual communities to address the issues that
Mm,
they're having.
yeah.
And because it's very, the things that we've experienced in America since January the 6th are very, are really different for us as a nation, because Europe has experienced fascism before. Europe has had the Italians know how to deal with it. We've never experienced anything like this in America. And so it's something that yoga should be addressing, the political climate here in this country. And if you go silent on that, then you're kind of leaving a whole group of people very vulnerable to what could happen.
If you could give advice, Austin, which I think you're going to do in your beautiful teacher training, to younger teachers that just started, about how to address these situations that you're just talking about that's happening in the US, like what kind of advice do you give them? Like, how do you go about that as a starting teacher in a way?
I think that I think it's this. I think that well, one, I think this. So we still promote veganism in Urban Sadhu Yoga. So, like, I still have young teachers come up to me and say, I don't feel comfortable saying the things that you're writing about, like, and so I tell them, well, keep practicing, know that me as your employer and the owner of the yoga studio am giving you a place to say this, and I will back you. So that's the first thing. When you have the support of the institution, then you have the ability to say things, right? And I explained to young teachers that the things that you say, the majority of the people in the room are going to stay with you because they're there because you say those things. The two people that don't come back, they weren't meant to be your students anyway. They just weren't. So like, let it go. And they heard the message, and if it resonates with them down the line, they will come back. But don't ever fear being actually a platform for mindfulness and thoughtfulness and compassion and empathy, and getting people to stop thinking emotionally and use critical thinking to actually start living their lives.
Yeah. Amazing.
And this
really good
and
point.
this is and I teach, and and one of the things that I teach now is that, and it's is that, like, when teachers teach alignment in a yoga asana, the alignment's not about the dogmatic alignment of a lineage, but it's about the critical thinking of what happens when your back foot is turned out. It's
Yeah.
notice